just a woman. Help me believe in what I could be and all that I am.
I honestly, truly mean that. I'm so thankful to stand before you all and tell you about all the goodness that God has done. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah. My husband is Elvis, and we've been married for 7 years this past December. And us getting married and Elvis coming to Canada is a big testimony all on its own. But today I'm going to talk to you about this little guy who will show up on the screen shortly. His name is Elijah Samuel Jacob. He is our son, and he is 5 months old. A testimony, by definition, is an eyewitness account. It's evidence or proof that something exists. And I want to tell you that my testimony is proof of God's goodness and God's faithfulness. A lot of these things, it's painful for me to talk about, and I'm not feeling that great, as you can probably hear in my voice. I ask that you'll just keep me in prayer as I share this with you. So after getting married, usually the next order of things is you have a baby. That's the normal thing that happened. But we had to wait simply because Elvis wasn't here. It took about 1.5 years for the visa to come through, and then he came. And our lives didn't start off very great. There's so many things going on in terms of jobs and like all sorts of things that were going on that we were like really upset about. We had no control over these things. The one thing that we did have control over, we thought, was having a baby. And so month after month we would try, and month after month it'd be a negative pregnancy result. And it got to the point where people were like, oh, maybe you should go see a fertility specialist. And we said, no, we know that God has provided all of our needs. He's given us a car that we need. He gives us a house over our heads. He's given us jobs. We trust him that he will give us a baby in his time. I'm a nurse by profession, and at that time I was working in the emergency department at the height of the pandemic, when COVID was a brand new thing. The people that got COVID were getting intubated and dying. Healthcare workers, it was so uncertain of what was going on. And I was also doing shifts, days and nights, all over the place. My sleep was all over the place. So I thought, maybe I'm not getting pregnant because I'm so stressed. Maybe I'm not getting pregnant because my sleep schedule is not correct. So I applied for a different job at the Toronto Western Family Health Team. And it was a stable, low stress, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 job, where I go and I play with babies, and then I give them a needle and say, see you in 2 months for your next needle. But I learned so much about babies, and babies are just everywhere around me. So I felt like, okay, this is God preparing me to have a baby. And still no pregnancy, no baby. And I live my life in 2-week blocks. So when you're trying, you track your ovulation and you wait 2 weeks and you do the pregnancy test. And so we'd say, let's go to Banff. I can't go hiking because what if I'm pregnant? And if I was sick, I wouldn't take Advil because what if I'm pregnant? And so many things I wouldn't do because, oh, what if I'm pregnant? And it was just not a very good way to live. And now it's getting to the point where people that got married at the same time as us, had toddlers and had their second child, and people that got married after us were having their babies, and our arms were so empty. And we questioned God, like, why is this happening to us? Why? What do we do? And we didn't really have any answers. It was just silence. So we decided to take things into our own hands, and we did end up going to see the fertility specialist. Elvis wasn't too keen on the idea at first because he wanted to trust in God and persevere, but I was fed up. I was like, we need to get some answers. We need to figure out what's going on. And so we went, and first they did a diagnostic cycle. So that involved getting an ultrasound and blood work every other day for an entire month. And after they did all these tests, they finally concluded nothing is wrong. There's no reason why you shouldn't be having a baby. And so what they did was they started us on this regimen of just vitamins, like vitamin C, vitamin D, coenzyme Q10, all things that you can get at any pharmacy. And they said, well, get your levels optimized, and then you can do 2 things. You can try on your own for a few months, or you can go ahead with a more aggressive treatment to have a baby. And so we put our own time limit. We said if we're not pregnant within this many number of months, we'll proceed with the treatment. And the fact that nothing was wrong to begin with should have been a red flag that says, hey, you don't need to do this, like God's God and it's in God's hands, but we just kept on persisting. And by the end of that number of months, I wasn't pregnant, so I was waiting for my next cycle to begin so we could start treatment. And that cycle never started because I had a positive pregnancy test.
Amen. Praise God.
I was finally pregnant. We were so excited. We were so thankful that God can move mountains. God can do the impossible, and He did it for us. He finally did it for us. It happened to be the Friday before Mother's Day, so it was very sentimental finding out. Elvis's mom, Amma, was here, and she was leaving to India the next day. So we were so excited to tell her here in Toronto in person, like, you're going to be a grandma. And we told our families, and everyone was so excited. They were jumping and shouting, and everyone was just so excited. And we were so thankful and so full of gratitude. And because we were seeing the fertility clinic for the first part of the pregnancy, they followed us. So every 48 hours, I would go in before work, get my blood work done, and I would go to work. And then while I was at work, I would get a phone call saying, hey, this is your level today, everything looks good. And I would look forward to that phone call. I would be around a certain time so I wouldn't see any patients then. And if I was with a patient, I'd be right back. And I'd run to a different exam room and answer the call and I'd come back. And then one day, I did the blood work, and then they gave me a call and they said, you need to come in and do an ultrasound tomorrow. I didn't really think anything of it because I was at that point in pregnancy where, okay, it's normal to have an ultrasound. And so we went in, and the ultrasound tech did everything, and I asked them for the picture afterwards because that's what people do. And the tech said, oh, there's nothing really to see at this point. The baby's like really, really tiny. There's no point in getting a picture. And I had a feeling, okay, something is not right because everyone else gets pictures after their ultrasounds. So we went and saw the doctor after the ultrasound, and they said that the heart rate of the baby was a little bit lower than expected, and the baby was measuring a few days smaller than what it was supposed to measure. But they said, don't worry about it, maybe it's because the dates got a little bit mixed up. So what they did was come back for another ultrasound in a week. And by now, it was around Father's Day. And we repeated the ultrasound, and there was no heartbeat. And at this time, we were devastated. We felt God was so cruel. Like, He answered our prayer. He dangled this dream in front of us. We were thinking of names. We were thinking of, like, car seats and clothes and all the nice things, and He just took it all away. And we didn't really understand why. And I think miscarriage is one of those things where you'll never understand why. But the following day, I had to go to the emergency department because I have a negative blood type, so I needed an injection of Rogaine. And it was still during COVID, so Elvis wasn't allowed to come inside with me. I had to go in by myself, and Elvis said, make sure you get a repeat ultrasound because God can bring that heartbeat back. God can bring life again. God can do it. Anyone can do it. God can do it. And we were so, that was like the last bit of faith. We were clinging on to so much faith. And Elvis had said, if there's a heartbeat, then God is still good. And if there is no heartbeat, then I'll walk away from God. And that was really tough. But while I was inside waiting for my ultrasound, waiting for the injection, God was ministering to Elvis in the waiting room. He came and he had an encounter with God in the waiting room and taught him about even if faith. And in simple terms, it says, I know God can do it. I know God will do it. But even if He doesn't, He is still good. Amen. And we got to the point where we got in the car afterwards, and there was no heartbeat, and I got my injection, and we were really, really upset. And the song that started playing was You're Worthy of My Song, and a song that we have sung at church many times. And the lyrics say, I'll give you my worship. You still deserve it. You're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy of my song. I'll pour out your praises in blessing and breaking. You're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy of our song. And our friends and our family, they rallied around us and they mourned with us and they comforted us. But anything they said, it wasn't good enough. It was this song that honestly gave us so much peace and gave us comfort. And we got to a point where we truly lived this song where, God, if we have a child in your time, good. And if we don't, that's okay too. We know that you're worthy.
Hallelujah.
And sometimes God gives us songs and seasons to say the words that we can't say.
Amen.
And I'm so thankful for this song because it's gotten through so many things, in the good times and the bad. No matter what, God is still worthy. And God taught me that He can't give you anything if your hands are closed. I wanted a baby and I wanted to control it. I wanted to control the method, I wanted to control the timing, I wanted to control the way we had the baby, everything. But God couldn't do anything with closed hands. When I opened my hands and I gave that matter to God, that's when He could work. He can only work when your hands are open. So after the miscarriage, the doctor said to wait for a few months so that I could recover, that everything can re-regulate again. And they said to call us when you're physically, mentally, emotionally ready to start fertility treatment to have a baby. And I wanted to say that, I would like to say that, I stayed strong and I held on to faith and all that, but it was hit and miss. There are certain weeks where, of course, God will do it. He'll do it. He's a wonder-working God. And other days and other weeks, it was I don't know. I don't think we'll ever have a baby. And it was just this swinging back and forth, back and forth. We're not meant to stay strong forever because that's not human, but we can rely on God's grace to get us through. And so I stopped taking all the vitamins. I even stopped taking prenatal vitamins. I stopped tracking my ovulation. I stopped everything and just went about my day-to-day. And God just constantly reminding myself, God is worthy. No matter what, God is worthy. And later that year, around Christmas time, I was feeling a little bit off, and so I did a COVID test, because that's what you do at that time. And the COVID test is negative. And just for the heck of it, I took a pregnancy test. And that pregnancy test, it was positive. And I had a hard time believing it, so I took 4 or 5 more pregnancy tests, and they were all positive. And going through that, I was afraid, but looking back, I realized that God didn't need my help to fulfill His promise. He can do that on His own. He didn't need me to take the vitamins. He didn't need me to track everything. And everybody's story is different, but in my story, He didn't want to share His glory with anything else. He didn't want to share His glory with vitamins or with treatment or anything. He has all the glory for the baby that is sitting in the back row right now. So on Christmas Day, we were debating if we should tell anybody. It seems like a good time to tell, but we just found out 2 days before. And we were, honestly, after the initial shock, we were afraid. We were afraid of having another miscarriage. We were afraid of getting our hopes up again and dreaming, and then all of that being taken away. But we still told our families, and that time when we told our families, there was no jumping and shouting. There was no, anything. Everyone's okay, we'll pray. We'll pray, and that was it. And it was a very cautious hope. It was a very quiet happiness, because even though we felt it, our families felt that miscarriage too. And so everyone is a little bit cautious and afraid to trust and be happy and to keep going. And the week after, there was a year-end invading fasting and prayer at Mom and Dad's house. And I remember that the basement was packed. Usually there's space, but that meeting in particular, it was so full that I had to sit on the stairs. And I knew that I was pregnant, but I was afraid, and I just put out a request to God. And I had done this so many times before. I had never received any confirmation or heard anything from God. And I said, God, if everything's going to be okay with this pregnancy, just tell me that I'll see your goodness. It was just an offhanded thought. It's not like I was sitting and fasting and praying and focusing. My mind is on what time do I need to make the child for everybody. I was even fully in the fasting and prayer. And God, Pastor was talking about storehouses in that meeting. And he would go and prophesy to different people and say, you're going to be a storehouse of God's blessings. You're going to be a storehouse of God's faithfulness. you're going to be a storehouse of God's grace. And he came from the front all the way to the back, up the stairs, pointed at me and said, you're going to be a storehouse of God's goodness. Your mouth will declare God's goodness. You will see God's goodness in your life. And I took that as such a confirmation, and it was very encouraging, because at that point even Pastor didn't know that we were pregnant. We had literally known for 2 weeks. And then going forward, it was the watch night service. And like everybody, I get a promise verse every year, but I really hold on to it by January, and by March, if you ask me what the promise verse is, I don't really remember. But for 2023, my promise verse was this. It was Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. Being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion in the day of Christ Jesus. Let me tell you, in 2023, I did not forget that verse. I held on to it. I changed my phone wallpaper, so every time I looked at my phone, that's what it was. And before every ultrasound, every appointment, I claimed that verse and I held on to it. And by God's grace, I had such a wonderful pregnancy. I mean, growing a human is not comfortable by any means, but God gave me the grace to get through all the discomforts and everything. And my due date came and went, and Elijah decided he likes it better inside than he does outside. So after my due date, the doctor called me to come in to be induced. And we went in all excited, all hopeful at 5 p.m., and it was so busy that night. They were just having back-to-back deliveries, and the doctor didn't see me until 4 a.m. And by that point, I didn't need to be induced because I was in labor on my own, progressing well by God's grace. And I just want to say that God places people strategically where you need them, when you need them. The unit that I was admitted to, Prima Auntie works there, and she wasn't working that day, but so many people would come in the room and say, "You're Prima's friend." She called me, "Are you okay?" And then they run out. "You're Prima's friend, you know Prima, are you okay? Are you good? Okay." And also Lena Auntie works there, and she was in the NICU. She said, "Are you good? Do you need anything?" Everything that we could have possibly wanted and more, like God placed Lena Auntie and Prima Auntie there and took care of everything. And I had the best team of nurses looking after me. So my water had broke around 4 a.m. and around 11 o'clock in the morning, I was 10 centimeters dilated and ready to push. And before I started pushing, I told the nurse I want to do delayed cord clamping, just to make sure the baby gets all the nutrients in the blood and oxygen and everything. And the nurse said, "Oh yeah, of course, we always do that. We'll only not do that if there's an emergency." So I started pushing, and Elijah was born at 11:44 a.m. And he came out and they put him on my chest, and all I could see was the back of his head. So his head is here and he's facing up. And his color was a little bit off, but I thought, oh, it's because they didn't cut the cord yet. Once they cut the cord, the color will come. And he wasn't really crying. I'm like, oh, that's okay for a few seconds, and they were stimulating him, and he started crying. And Elvis saw, and Mommy was there, and we were just in shock and joy, and there's this baby's here. And then all of a sudden, the doctor turns to Elvis and says, "Do you want to cut the cord now?" And I was like, what happened to the delayed cord clamping? They cut the cord, they took the baby and put him in the warmer across the other side of the room. And then seconds later, I hear code pink, room 2214, code pink, room 2214. And that's when it sunk in what was happening. The room filled with nurses. There was 15, 20 people in the room, and I couldn't see anything. I was still in bed getting sewn up. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't feel anything. There's people all surrounding him, and I couldn't see anything at all. And being an emergency nurse, I don't get scared in emergencies. I don't panic. That's professionally, I can do it. I can put my mind there and I can get through it. But in this emergency, I panicked. I was stuck. I couldn't see him. I couldn't see what was happening. I had no idea what was going on. I could hear some faint cries here or there, but that's all. And then, just like that, the room was empty. So he was born at 11:44. By 12:03, it was just me and the nurse in the room. Everybody was gone. Elvis was gone. Baby was gone. Mommy was outside, updating everybody. Within 20 minutes, my entire world changed. They took him to the NICU. And the nurse gave me my phone, and I'm calling Elvis. And this is the first picture of Elijah that I saw, the first picture of my son. And I kept on telling him, can you show me his face? Like, what does his face look like? I can't see what's going on. And eventually, they let me go see him. They had to wait for my epidural to wear off so that I could have feeling in my legs to transfer into a wheelchair. And then they pushed me over and took me to see him. And it looks like I'm seeing him in this picture, but really the bed was higher and I was low and I couldn't stand up because I still couldn't feel out of my legs. And when I saw him on the BiPAP, with everything going on, all his vitals, everything, I knew this isn't it. It's not over yet. The way he was breathing, he was getting very, very tired. So they consulted the team from Sick Kids to come from Sick Kids to Centenary. They intubated him, put him on a ventilator, and then they took him back to Sick Kids. And this is me getting to hold him for the first time, like 7 hours after he was born. Finally getting to see his face, even though it's all covered in tape and there's lots of medical equipment. And after they put him in this stretcher, and the incubator is on the top right there, and they have all sorts of settings and things for IVs and medical pumps, they put him in that, and then him and Elvis went to Sick Kids, and I was stuck. And I saw them walking away down that long hallway, and I just broke down. Like, what happened actually hit me. And I remember thinking, God, like, what are you doing? You promised he would be okay. You promised that we would have him. He's here now, what are you doing? And I remember Pastor being there and Mommy being there, and they were talking to me. I remember their face and mine talking to me, but I have no idea what they were saying, because I was so broken as to what was happening. And then the next morning, I was discharged. They said, well, the baby's not here, so you can go home. And as someone that just gave birth, I should have been in bed. But instead, we got into a car, went home, took a shower, and then went straight to Sick Kids to see him. And then this is what he looked like there. They had all sorts of tests monitoring him. They think that as he was being born, he inhaled meconium and that went into his lungs. And so they were worried that he would have, he had pneumonia, which is preventing him from breathing properly. And from the lack of oxygen, they weren't sure, so they were monitoring his neurological status and everything. But by God's grace, day by day, he got better. All of the tests they ran, other than the chest x-ray, everything else was normal. His head was normal, his heart, it had some defects, but they were normal, he was getting better. And they finally got to hold him without a lot of equipment. He still had a lot of lines there under the blanket, but we finally got to hold him. And after we held him this time, we put him back, and that was the first time we saw him with his eyes open. He was 2 days old, and the whole time he was sedated because he was intubated. So without the sedation, this is the first time I'm realizing, oh, you're my baby. Because before he was like a little doll with all the things attached to him. But this is him with his eyes open. And he was there at Sick Kids, and he was well enough to be transferred to Centenary back to where he was born, because they wanted to give him antibiotics for a week to protect him, if anything. His oxygen levels were fine, like everything was okay, but just as a preventative measure, they wanted to give him antibiotics. And so in Centenary, in the NICU there, he was in this incubator for like a week. So anytime we wanted to change to the diaper, it was through those holes. If you wanted to put his pacifier in, it was through those holes. And the only time we could really hold him is when we were feeding him. And we couldn't stay there overnight, like there's no place to stay. So I was at home pumping, and then Elvis would bring the milk to the hospital, and it was a really, really rough week. But God got us through that week. And when Elijah was 8 days old, we got to walk out of the same hallway as a family of 3, no medical equipment, nothing. God is so good that everything was okay. God is so faithful. And I'm standing here to tell you that even though all of that happened, God is still good. Romans chapter 5, verses 3 and 4 says, not only so, but we glory in our sufferings, because we know that in our suffering it produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. We will go through hard times and trials until our very last day here on earth. But those trials eventually give us a hope that anchors our soul in Jesus, to the point where we don't need anything else except Jesus. Our focus is Jesus, and our only desire is Jesus. And I know that this message may be geared towards maybe people who are waiting for kids, but let me tell you, if you have a child, if you're able to conceive that child, carry that child, and have a healthy pregnancy and delivery, you're looking into the face of a million little miracles. All it takes is one small thing for something to go wrong. One small change in DNA. And it could be a totally different child, or the child could not exist at all. So God has given us all grace to go through things, and anytime that you're not sure of His faithfulness or His goodness, you just need to look at the face of your child. And my promise verse for this year, for 2024, is 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12. It says, "And Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, 'Thus far the Lord has helped us.'" It's hard to find a wallpaper with this verse on it. It's not very popular, but every time I look at Elijah's face, every time I see him, I'm reminded of God's goodness and God's faithfulness. That's not to say that it's hard, and there are certain moments where I wonder, what did I get myself into? But God is good, and I want to encourage you that in your season of waiting, don't give up on God. Don't try and help God. He's there to help you. Just to trust in His faithfulness and His goodness, because He will carry you through. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for this opportunity.